The day I died had repeated for the 17th time, and the strangest thing wasn't the death itself, but the fact that this time, when I opened my eyes at 7 a.m. and saw the familiar ceiling with that small crack in the right corner, I knew I wouldn't have to go through it alone anymore. My name is Wesley. I'm a second-year psychology student at a university in Washington State. If anyone ever asked me what it feels like to be trapped in a repeating day, I would say it's like being locked inside a room with no doors, a room where everything is so familiar it's terrifying, and that very familiarity slowly suffocates you, bit by bit. The first time the day repeated, I panicked so badly I couldn't breathe. The second time, I tried to change everything. The third time, I started doubting myself. By the 10th time, all that was left was emptiness. But by the 17th time, I had learned one thing. If I couldn't escape, then at least I could choose how to live inside it. And the person I chose to change that with was Vance. I had been watching him for the previous 16 loops not because I had any clear intention, but simply because, among the hundreds of faces on campus, he was the only one who made me feel like he carried the same kind of nameless loneliness as me. Every morning, he appeared at 8:12, standing under the maple tree near the school gate, holding a cup of black coffee with no sugar. He never looked at anyone for too long, as if he was waiting for something, but even he didn't know what it was. This time, I decided to break everything. When the clock on my phone turned to 8:12, I was already standing there. My heart was beating faster than usual, even though I already knew every single movement of his every step, every glance. As Vance walked past me like he always did, I called his name. The moment he stopped and turned to look at me, his cold but sharp eyes meeting mine, I knew everything had changed. I told him things no one could possibly know unless they had lived the same day with him multiple times, from the fact that he drank his coffee black to his habit of standing alone under the maple tree. When I told him that today had already repeated 17 times, he didn't laugh at me like the others had in previous loops. He just looked at me for a long time, then asked me to prove it. I counted down, and right on cue, a bicycle nearly hit a girl behind him exactly as it had happened 16 times before. His eyes changed instantly. But what made my heart nearly stop wasn't that he believed me. It was when I told him that tonight he would die at 11:42 on the road behind the library, and he didn't deny it. He simply looked at me and asked a question that shattered everything inside me. You remember too, right? And that was when I understood I wasn't the only one trapped in this loop. We stood there, in the middle of the crowded campus, but the world seemed to have separated from us. There were only two strangers who had just realized they were sharing the same fate. I asked him what time he died, and when he answered 11:42, the same as me, I couldn't help but smile, not out of joy, but because I had finally found someone who understood this feeling. And then something changed inside me. It was no longer despair or fear, but a strange, almost warm feeling as I looked at him standing in front of me. The sunlight fell on his dark brown hair, highlighting every feature on his face, a face I had seen so many times but had never truly felt until this moment. I told him that since we already knew we were going to die, at least we should live today differently. He didn't refuse. We started walking together with no plan, no specific purpose, simply because we didn't want to waste another repeating day. We talked about small things. Music, classes, things I would normally never have the courage to share with someone who was almost a stranger. But perhaps because we knew everything would be erased the next day, it all became much easier. I realized Vance wasn't as cold as he appeared. He just wasn't used to opening up. And every time he smiled faintly, my heart would beat faster in a way I couldn't understand. There was a moment when we sat on the grass behind the library in the afternoon. The wind blew gently, making his hair flutter slightly. He looked at me with different eyes, no longer defensive like in the morning, but something softer, almost fragile. If tomorrow everything repeats again, he said quietly, will you still remember me? I didn't answer right away because I knew the answer was yes. But what scared me wasn't remembering him, it was the thought that if the loop ever ended one day, would I still get to meet him again? I looked at him. The distance between us was so close I could hear his breathing. In a moment I couldn't even understand myself. I reached out and lightly touched his hand. He didn't pull away. Instead, he took my hand and held it gently, as if confirming that I was real. that this moment was real even though we both knew it would disappear when the clock struck 11:42 tonight. And for the first time since the loop began, I was no longer afraid of the death waiting for me at the end of the day. Because at least, before everything ended, I had found someone I didn't want to forget. We didn't let go of each other's hands even when we stood up and left the grass. That should have made me feel embarrassed, but strangely it didn't. The only feeling I had was fear that if I let go, he would disappear, just like everything else in this loop, like this endlessly repeating day itself. Vance didn't say anything about us holding hands. He simply walked beside me, slowly, as if trying to stretch out every second. I realized he was probably thinking the same thing I was. If this was the only time we truly met, then there was no reason to keep our distance anymore. "What have you tried?" he asked as we walked along the stone path behind the dorms. His voice was low, but no longer as cold as before. I understood he was asking about the loop, about all the times I had lived through this day before meeting him. I smiled faintly, a smile without much joy. "Almost everything," I replied, looking straight ahead. "I've tried not going to school, talking to other people, changing my schedule, even staying in my room all day. But the result is always the same. 11:42 I die, then wake up again at 7 a.m. I paused for a moment, then continued in a quieter voice. "There was one time I tried to avoid the road behind the library, but somehow I still ended up there. It felt like something was pulling me toward that ending." Vance stayed silent for a while. When I turned to look at him, I saw him watching me with eyes so deep it made it hard to breathe. "Me too," he said softly. "I've tried changing everything, but the outcome never changes. It's like that death is a fixed point." I swallowed hard. A cold feeling ran down my spine, but his hand was still there, warm, holding me in the present. "Then maybe," I began, but I didn't finish the sentence, because I didn't know what to say next. I didn't know if there was any way to escape, or if we were just delaying the inevitable. "Maybe we don't need to escape," Vance said, his voice strangely calm. "At least not today." I looked at him, confused, and he gently squeezed my hand, pulling me forward. "If we can't change the ending, then we'll change the middle part," he said. And I realized that was exactly what I had tried to do when I decided to talk to him that morning. We kept walking and talking more freely, no longer as cautious as before. I began to see small pieces of the real Vance, not the distant version I had observed from afar during the 16 previous loops. He liked indie music, especially songs with sad lyrics but gentle melodies. He didn't like crowded parties, and he hated feeling forced to become someone he wasn't. "That sounds like me," I said, and he smiled this time more clearly, no longer faint. "Maybe that's why you chose me," he replied. That sentence made my heart skip a beat, because he was right without even knowing it. I had reached out to someone like me, someone who could understand the feeling of standing outside the world. The afternoon passed faster than I expected. When the sunlight began to soften, we found ourselves near the library again, the place where I knew everything would end. But this time it didn't feel the same as before. In the past, as the moment approached, I would panic and try to run. Now, with Vance beside me, I felt strangely calm, as if death was no longer the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was waking up tomorrow without him. 2 hours left, Vance said, looking at his watch. I nodded. I didn't need to ask what he was thinking. I already knew we were thinking the same thing. "Have you ever?" I hesitated, then continued, "Have you ever thought that if we did something different enough, something big enough, we might break the loop?" Vance looked at me. His eyes softened, and he shook his head gently. "I have," he said, "but I've already tried. It didn't work." I felt a little disappointed, but not surprised. If it were that easy, I probably would have found it long ago. We stopped near the road behind the library, the place where I had died 16 times before, and where I knew we would die for the 17th time today. The air here was quieter, with fewer people passing by. The streetlights had begun to turn on, casting a soft golden glow that was both warm and lonely. "We still have about an hour," I said. Vance nodded, but he wasn't looking at his watch anymore. He was only looking at me, as if trying to memorize every detail of my face. "Wesley," he called my name. The way he said it made it feel more meaningful than ever, as if it wasn't just a name, but something he didn't want to forget. "Yeah," I replied, my voice becoming small without knowing why. He stepped closer. The distance between us was so small I could feel the warmth from his body. My heart started beating fast, not from fear, but from an emotion I had been avoiding this whole time. "If you still remember tomorrow," he said softly, almost whispering, "find me." I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and nodded, even though I wasn't sure if there would be a tomorrow in that sense. "I will," I said. It wasn't a light promise, it was something I knew I would do, no matter what happened. A silence fell over us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a meaningful silence, as if we both knew time was passing faster than we wanted, and neither of us wanted to be the one to break this moment. Then Vance raised his hand and touched my cheek so lightly I almost thought I was imagining it. But the feeling was too real, too clear to deny. "I don't want to forget you," he said. Those words struck straight into my heart, completely tearing down all the defenses I had built up until now. I stopped thinking. I stopped analyzing. I stopped worrying about tomorrow or the loop. I simply followed my feelings. I leaned forward, and my lips touched his light, hesitant kiss at first, then deeper, as if we were trying to carve this feeling into our bones, so that no matter what happened, it would stay with us. He didn't push me away. Instead, he pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around my waist, holding me as if I were the only real thing in this world. And in that moment, I forgot that we were about to die. I forgot that tomorrow might erase everything. I only knew that I was here with him. The kiss didn't last long, but the feeling it left was etched into every cell of my body. Even if tomorrow everything was erased, at least my body would still remember how Vance had held me, how his breath had mixed with mine, how my heart had beaten so fast I could barely control it. When we pulled apart, the distance between us was just enough to see each other clearly. I realized his eyes had completely changed, no longer defensive, no longer distant, but something raw and real that scared me, because I knew I was looking at him the same way. "How much time do we have left?" Vance asked quietly, as if afraid to break the fragile space between us. I glanced at the clock, even though I already knew the answer. 23 minutes, I said. That number sounded cruel, like a reminder that no matter how hard we tried to stretch this moment, it would still end on time just like every time before. Vance didn't say anything more. He simply took my hand again, this time holding it tighter, as if trying to keep me from being pulled away by something invisible. We began walking toward the road behind the library, the place where I had died so many times that I no longer felt afraid. But this time, every step felt heavier, not because I feared death, but because I didn't want to leave him. "Wesley," he called my name again. I turned to look at him, trying to memorize every detail of his face, the way his eyebrows furrowed slightly when he thought, the way his eyes always carried a hint of sadness even when he didn't say it. "If we can't escape," he said slowly, "then at least we had today." I nodded, my throat tightening. I didn't know how to respond because I knew he was right, but that didn't make it any easier. It only made me realize how much I didn't want to lose him, even though I had only truly known him for one day. Or rather, one loop. We stopped at the beginning of the road, where the streetlights created patches of light and shadow. The air here was a little colder, carrying the familiar feeling of death approaching. I had stood here 16 times before. I had tried to run. I had tried to change things. But this time I didn't move, because I didn't want to waste the last few minutes being afraid. Instead, I turned to Vance and, without thinking, pulled him close, hugging him so tightly I could feel his heartbeat pounding as hard as mine. He didn't resist. He hugged me back, his arms gripping me as if letting go would make me disappear instantly. "I'll remember you," I said, my voice breaking. I didn't care if it sounded weak, because it was the only truth I had right now. Vance didn't answer immediately, but I felt his arms tighten. When he spoke, his voice was slightly hoarse. "Me too," he said, "no matter what happens." We stood there, holding each other, until I heard the familiar sound of an engine in the distance, growing closer. My body reacted before I could think. I pulled Vance back, as if I could change something this time, as if I could save us from the predetermined ending. "No," I whispered, even though I knew it was pointless. But I couldn't stop myself from trying not when he was here with me. The headlights of the truck appeared around the corner, blindingly bright. For a brief moment, everything seemed to slow down. Every second stretched endlessly. Every movement became painfully clear. I saw Vance turn to look at me. There was no fear in his eyes, only something calm and resolute. Before I could say anything, he pulled me close again. His lips met mine once more. This kiss wasn't hesitant or gentle anymore. It was an affirmation, a silent promise. And then came the impact. A powerful force ripped me away from him. A blinding white light swallowed everything. In the final moment before everything disappeared, the only thought in my head wasn't fear, it was a prayer. Please don't let me forget him. 7 a.m. I bolted upright, my heart racing wildly, my breathing ragged as if I had just run a long distance. For a second, I didn't know where I was or what had just happened until I saw the familiar ceiling with the crack in the right corner. Everything came rushing back at once. Monday, October 14th. I clenched my fist. I could still feel the warmth of his hand there. Without hesitation, I jumped out of bed, quickly put on my jacket, and didn't care about anything else. There was only one thought in my head. I have to find Vance. 8:12 a.m. Under the maple tree near the school gate. I arrived early. My heart was beating so fast I could barely stand still. When he appeared, everything around me seemed to blur. There was only him walking as he always did, unaware that yesterday or the previous loop, we had died together. I stepped closer and called his name. When he turned around, his eyes were still the same, distant and guarded, with no sign that he remembered me or what had happened between us. My heart tightened, but I didn't stop. We met before, I said, my voice more certain than I felt. He frowned, looking at me as if I were a stranger. No, we haven't, he replied. Just those words were enough for me to understand he didn't remember. Not like I did. A hollow feeling spread through my chest, but I refused to stop. Not when I already knew what we could become to each other. Today is repeating, I continued, and tonight you're going to die at 11:42. He looked at me, his eyes sharpening exactly like yesterday in the previous loop. I realized that even if he didn't remember, the path could still be the same. If I guided it. But this time, I wasn't going to let it end like that anymore.